Good afternoon, everyone. We'll get started in a few minutes. I'm going to give everyone a chance to get connected. Hello, Matt. All right, we can go ahead and get started. It looks like we have a good crowd so far. So thank you everyone for attending this afternoon's webinar on NASEO AASHTO's NEVI Case Studies. Thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules to attend this webinar and hear about all the great work the states are doing on NEVI. To highlight all of that work over the last few months, NASEO, AASHTO, and Atlas Public Policy released a series of case studies exploring the various challenges and successes from the first round of NEVI in Alaska, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. And then we have case studies featuring Colorado and Hawaii to be released soon. So these case studies really delve deeper into states' NEVI solicitation design and stakeholder process. They outline the scoring rubric and application evaluation process and share some lessons learned and next steps for each of those states' NEVI programs. So we're excited to hear from a handful of states. We have Alaska, Colorado, and Hawaii joined with us today to discuss some key findings from the case studies and share a little bit more about how the first round of NEVI implementation went and kind of discuss next steps. So before I introduce our panelists, just wanted to remind attendees that we'll have time for Q&A at the end. So during the presentations or after, feel free to post your questions in the Q&A box, and we will address those during the discussion portion. But without further ado, wanted to introduce our panelists. We're joined today by Josie Hartley from the Alaska Energy Authority, Matt Mines from Colorado Energy Office, and Robin Shishido from Hawaii DOT. So I will hand it over to Josie to get us started.
Thank you. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I have a few slides. And let me know when you're able to see that.
Looks good.
Okay. See. So I'll just do a quick intro to AEA, who we are. So AEA is the Alaska Energy Authority. We're the state energy office for the state of Alaska, a public corporation of the state. Our mission is to reduce the cost of energy, and we're the lead agency for statewide energy policy and program development. We're also the lead agency for EV activities, installation of EVSE in the state, and our EV program goal is to lead the effort to minimize barriers to EV adoption within the state of Alaska. Just to give a little bit of background as to where Alaska sits in the EV landscape compared to what it might look like nationally. So we maintain a running tally of EV registrations in the state. We're at a total of 3,000 EVs that are registered within the state of Alaska, which represents about 0.5% of our total EV registrations. And then if you kind of compare that relative to what the national average is, sitting somewhere around 7%. So significantly less registrations in Alaska than there are nationally. And then this just kind of depicts where the EV registrations are located within the state. Right here in the center is Anchorage, where I live, most populated area of the state. And then here's the NASEO region. And then this 164 represents the interior. And that is where our corridor is located. Our corridor goes between Anchorage and Fairbanks, which is located somewhere up here. So you can see that most of the EV registrations are located within those three areas, with the exception of Southeast Alaska, which is a little bit different. So in our NEVI plan, we proposed a phased approach to deploy NEVI funds, the first of which was to build out our alternative fuel corridor. We only have one alternative fuel corridor in Alaska, and that's the area of roadway between Anchorage and Fairbanks. It's about 365 miles. And then our other phases of work will be to build out the remainder of the highway systems, the marine highway system, and then as funding allows, we would look at installing charging stations in rural hub communities and then in urban and destination locations. And then for the highway phases, this kind of depicts what I described in the previous slide. So you can see between Anchorage and Fairbanks in the light blue is our alternative fuel corridor, 365 miles. And then the remainder of the highway systems are depicted in the other areas of the map. So the light green, other main highway systems. And then there's the marine highway system, which is a ferry highway system along with the southwestern and southeastern portions of the state. So all of those other areas outside of the AFC are not within scope for the request for applications that we did just last year. So zooming in a little bit on our single alternative fuel corridor, between Anchorage and Fairbanks, our request for applications that we put forward last summer was to solicit for site hosts between Anchorage and Fairbanks. And along that corridor, we identified 14 priority sites, and you can see them here depicted on our on this line diagram. So basically what we said, we opened up a request for applications and said, please provide proposed sites for any of these locations along the corridor. And then once the applications were collected, it was about 75 days that the application period was open. We evaluated applications against each priority site. So applications in Anchorage were only scored against one another. Applications in Eagle River were scored against one another, et cetera. And then you can see here that there is one gap area between Denali State Park and Cantwell that was about 80 miles. That was an exception that we had approved in our first implementation plan. And if you kind of look at the map here, you can see that there isn't really any utility service between Denali State Park and Cantwell in certain areas, certainly nowhere that you could pull power from. So we had anticipated on the front end that we wouldn't be getting any applications along that area. It's extremely rural with very few, well, no commercial establishments and very few residences even in that area. So as for our application requirements, we had 3 sections of our application. So we had the administrative application, basically signatures and certifications. We had a technical package, and then we had our pricing application. And our technical package, it was separated into a number of different areas. So we asked for applicants to provide narrative, basically outlining their project methodology, another narrative section describing the management plan, the schedule, how they plan to develop and operate the stations. Then we had a section for experience and qualifications, and to accompany that also requested the resumes of the project team. And then we also requested for examples of past EVSE installations of the contractor that was going to be provided the proposal. And then 2 forms were also required, a site proposal form, which had a lot of the details of the actual site layouts, all of the details of the parties that were going to be involved in the construction of the site. And then also the utility service site information form is something that we put together with our local utilities. So there were 3 different utilities that service the corridor area. So we worked with each of them to develop the utility service site information form, which is how we basically qualified the cost to bring utility service to the proposed site, as well as really characterizing the kinds of upgrades that were going to be required in order to install the EVSE on the site. And then in addition to that, we had our pricing application. So that was really the 3rd major component of the application. And with that, we asked for of course, a cost proposal for the full site, start to finish, including the 5-year O&M period. And then we also asked for applicants to provide us with a narrative, which provided their rationale as to how they arrived at their pricing. So an opportunity for them to explain their assumptions and their methodologies that they used in arriving at their full cost. And then as for how the different elements of the application were scored, the technical portion of the application comprised 80% of the overall weight. And then the pricing application ended up being 20% of the overall weight of the application itself. So our application period was open for about 75 days. In total, we received 34 applications, and we received an application for almost every priority site. So 13 out of 14 priority sites received applications, with the exception of Clear in the northern part of the corridor, which is actually just kind of an Air Force base. So we didn't necessarily expect to receive any applications there, but generally speaking, we received quite a bit of interest, given the landscape. There's not a whole lot of EV penetration in the state yet. So we were unsure whether or not we would receive a ton of interest from private industry to support the program, but we were pleasantly surprised to receive 34 applications. And another piece that, caused us to be, apprehensive or unsure of how many applications we would receive is the fact that we did require a 20% match. We didn't subsidize that match requirement at all on the state level. So, taking into account that there's relatively few EVs in the state, we weren't sure whether or not site hosts would see the economic case to develop a site and provide that, anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000 in match. So they did see it as a viable option, and we did receive plenty of applications. And then these are the sites that we ended up selecting. So out of 14 priority sites, we did end up selecting 9. So 2 of which are in Fairbanks, the northernmost portion of the AFC, and then Nenana, Healy, Cantwell, and Denali State Park, Trapper Creek, Wasilla, and Anchorage. And you can see that the network provider, there were a number of different network providers that were selected, Tesla, Joule, and then Flow as well. And then in some cases, it was actually the OEM that was the grantee, or that will be the grantee. In other cases, that was a business development firm or something like that. Like in Wasilla and Anchorage, it was just a property owner that actually applied, and they partnered with Flow. But yeah, those were the sites that we ended up with. There were 9 sites and all pretty really great applications. As far as key findings and lessons learned, we are going to be able to build out our corridor with this 9 selected sites. We did provide that layout to the Joint Office and Federal Highways last year in our implementation plan. They did indicate that those sites would be sufficient to call our corridor built out. We also found that the NEVI funding was a sufficient incentive to attract bids from site hosts. Initially we were concerned that the match could dissuade people from participating in the program, but we did have sufficient interest in the program. So kind of a lesson learned from that is we don't necessarily need to subsidize the matching requirements on the state level, at least at this stage. We did find that pricing did play a pretty large role in our application selection. So for example, Tesla offered 8 port bids at half the price of the next competitor. So we found that the costs of some of the sites were enough to really set Tesla apart from the rest of the proposers in the areas that Tesla did propose on. We did work with the utilities to develop our cost estimate forms, which was really helpful. And we required all of the applicants to engage and work with the utilities up front. It didn't deter applicants at all. It was actually great, and it helped to create more accurate cost estimates and to get that engagement started with the utilities on the front end. About 78% of our awards were actually issued to EVSE providers, so directly to Tesla or to Joule. I think we probably could have conducted additional outreach in more rural areas to garner further interest in the program, in some of the sites where we didn't really get a ton of applications. We found that including our actual scoring rubric or scoring criteria within the RFA supported the proposal quality. So proposers knew exactly what it was that we were looking for, what our expectations were, and so it made for really strong applications in our view. And then lastly, I would just say that due diligence was a very important factor in our application review, where there were most of the applications were great. You know, we did find some discrepancies within some of the applications. So some applications were not reporting the correct utility costs that have been agreed upon with the utility on their utility forms. So double checking with the utility to make sure that everything is as it appears in the application. We did call references for each of the applications, and there were some discrepancies that were identified there, and then also cross-referencing with PlugShare. So if I would just say, make sure that you do your due diligence as it relates to the applicant's references, PlugShare, everything, because at the end of the day, you know, our job is to be good stewards of federal funds and to make sure that these programs are implemented responsibly, and that you know, we're fully vetting the people that we're going to be partnering with to deliver the program, because it's not just a reflection on them, but it's also a reflection on the state and the program as a whole. So with that wraps up my bit of the presentation. And Delaney, did you want me to wait until the end to take questions, or as we go?
We can wait until the end. That would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Josie. All right, we'll hand it over to Matt from Colorado.
Thanks, Delaney. My name is Matt from Colorado. Here to share kind of lessons learned on just our first couple rounds of implementation. I'll queue up. I have some slides to structure the conversation. Is this showing up for you guys? Nothing makes me feel old than trying to queue up a presentation or a slide deck during a presentation.
Looks good. Yep.
All good. Okay, cool. So we are implementing both NEVI and kind of state dollars within our Colorado DC fast charging plazas program. And so, you know, kind of commingling sources of funds to implement large scale fast charging projects statewide. So whether they're on a alternative fuel corridor or not, the plazas program is funding those projects concurrently and through a single application, with, of course, the intention of simplifying the applicant experience and soliciting projects everywhere to fulfill kind of our anticipated charging infrastructure needs without, of course, incurring additional administrative burden as well. And so we did roll this into an existing program. Our plazas program has been around since 2019, but Colorado's been offering incentives for charging infrastructure since 2013, kind of starting off with our Charge Ahead Colorado program. This is a community-based level 2 and DC fast charging program that then subsequently informed our corridor program, which in a lot of ways is aligned with the goals of NEVI. And of course that provided us data and experience to inform the deployment of our plazas program, which rolled out a few years ago, was again investing in large-ish scale fast charging projects, primarily in the metro area to start, and then a couple of years in expanded statewide as the needs evolved and the market evolved. The early years of it intended to really provide fast charging for residents of multifamily housing, TNC drivers, again primarily located within the metro area, but of course and growth in the electric vehicle market in Colorado, we did expand it statewide prior to NEVI becoming available, which, was a pretty exciting opportunity, of course, for us to expand our funding resources and, again, expand kind of where we were investing. Interestingly, though, kind of concurrently, the state of Colorado passed some legislation. Without getting into the nitty gritty of state legislation, it created an organization called the Community Access Enterprise, which provides us a chunk of change to invest in charging infrastructure statewide and transportation electrification more broadly. But charging infrastructure is receiving a good amount of funding from the enterprise. And so both sources of funds are coming into our plazas program, which is, again, allowing us to implement these dollars and hopefully do so efficiently. We were rolling it in to an existing program, and primarily what it required of us was increasing the minimum specifications and kind of updating our program guides, applications to align with NEVI and what the minimum criteria are through that program. But we are investing statewide, whether or not it's along a corridor or not. And I think that's an important message, at least for projects in Colorado, that I think is somewhat confusing, I guess. Oftentimes, right, this is the NEVI program, so people think it has to be a corridor program, but we do want to invest in very broadly in community-based locations using the enterprise funding. And so that's just something we hammer home a lot. Prior to our receiving the NEVI funding, we had our Charge Ahead Colorado program, we had our corridors program, and we had a couple years of data through our plazas program. And looking at sort of the market demand, the growth in EV ownership based on the differing geographies of the state, we tiered the incentives based on geographic location. And so through our plazas program, we offer funding up to a cap. So if you're in the Denver metro area, those projects are eligible for 50% up to 90,000 per port. So if you're deploying 4 ports, you could receive $360,000. If you're in the Denver metro area, if you're in the Front Range, you're eligible for 65%. And then if you're in kind of the rural parts of the state, you're eligible, or one is eligible for up to 80% and 140,000 per port. And so using some of our cost data, looking at the applications we received, we were fairly confident, we could cap our incentives at, these levels and still receive a robust response from the market. And so again, kind of our corridor program informed our siting and was akin to kind of a NEVI implementation, but at a smaller scale. And so several years ago, we deployed 33 sites now across the state along each of these existing corridors, right, with the intention of enabling statewide travel throughout Colorado. And with that, we linked presumed low utilization sites with high utilization sites, which I think is a good strategy, maybe in kind of those nascent stages of the market where there's concerns of market demand or utilization that may create challenging business cases for different sites throughout the state, et cetera. So that has been deployed, and so we're looking to initially fill other gaps, even though these aren't all NEVI compliant sites. We understand that they do enable travel, and so if you're looking at this map of Colorado, right, the Eastern Plains are less sufficiently served through this program. And very fortunately, between our first round and second round, kind of the subsequent round, we did get sites that will largely build out the entire Eastern Plains of Colorado, which has been tremendous. Second round of our NEVI program, we got sites that will largely fulfill kind of those southern corridors of the state as well. So feeling pretty optimistic about progress towards meeting our NEVI goals and that statewide infrastructure that's going to support travel in an EV. So with this program, right, we adjusted things and we're, not inclined during kind of the outset of the program to identify specific communities. We developed a gap map, and really the intention was to nudge applicants towards the gaps, right? They were going to be prioritized in the scoring process and the evaluation. And, with the mapping tools that our colleagues at CDOT developed, right, it was very apparent, the communities that were insufficiently served and those that would be prioritized, which, again, because we largely fully built out or, awarded projects that will build out the Eastern Plains, the southern corridors, feeling pretty darn good about kind of the outcomes of the gap map and how that communicated to the market. One of the things we did, maybe that was less effective, I haven't heard anybody who had a project result from it, was our teaming partner list. The intention of that was to take us out of the middle, right? Kind of the infrastructure developers, potential site hosts. Frequently, they're getting in touch with us, and we don't want to be in the middle. We certainly don't play favorites, and can't make those connections. And so, with that, we're getting a lot of those communications, but unable to do something about it. So we got a teaming partner list where, the parties could join separate from us. Lots of people signed up for it. I'm not sure if any projects have resulted from it, though. I guess that's why I'm unsure of the efficacy of that, but was certainly worth a shot. And I'll try to hustle along. I think I'm proud of my 10 minutes. Just generally, we had a very robust response to our first two rounds. We had over 100 million requested in our first round and 50 million in the second. The evaluation certainly was very extensive, given the number of applications, number of sites, the implications and kind of interplay of awarding sites and then progress towards our NEVI build out. So it was very extensive. We did provide conditional awards, kind of you're conditionally awarded pending XYZ and acceptance of the grant award prior to finalizing the awards. And then that resulted in several of our awardees withdrawing over time. Some organizations were acquired. There was a couple, which was interesting. Site host hesitation around proceeding, or kind of corporate dynamics of site hosts and corporate, and then charging infrastructure companies, and then market turbulence, I guess, would be one overarching theme. I feel like I should hustle along. I guess from the contracting was fairly extensive, despite us having an existing scope of work that we had used for our prior plazas projects, right? It needed to be adapted, but didn't need to be, kind of wholly developed. So that round one took quite a bit of time. But round two, we were able to get scopes of work out in 5 weeks, which was great. Just looking again to push that contracting and project implementation forward at a much quicker pace. We did launch our third round on Monday. So that's, again, I guess part of our effort to get projects in the queue and this pipeline under development. And so this third round is open for the next couple months, I guess till late September. It's open. One of the things we did do was refine our gap map. And so with 2 rounds of funding and experience, we're, you know, aware of pretty specific areas that, you know, without a project there, we will not fulfill our obligations. And so we did call out 20 communities, and this includes communities along corridors as well as kind of community-based locations off of alternative fuel corridors, you know, just sites that we know are critical to delivering that statewide infrastructure that we're striving for. So it's going to be interesting, you know, following this round 3, you know, do we get projects in all, you know, all 20? That'd be kind of the dream if we can make that happen. So we'll see. Keep you posted, Delaney, on how that comes out. I guess, yeah, and then just quickly through the others, you know, we feel like we have come up with an appropriate incentive for, you know, the setting, for the geography, to get a market response, but also spread our dollars as far as possible, right? I think our tiered incentives have been highly effective and, yeah, have resulted in us being able to fund more projects than not, which has been tremendous. And then, yeah, we're just kind of consistently revisiting the data, you know, cost data, applicant data, you know, the plug share, the market data, to see the vehicle data. Vehicle data is very interesting as it evolves in Colorado, to understand, you know, how our programs should evolve. Yeah, we're trying to get a lot of projects in the queue, hoping to open some of the initial rounds NEVI sites over the next couple months. They are long duration projects. Many of the utilities tell folks in Colorado, right, 50 to 80 weeks to get a, you know, critical piece of equipment like transformer. So we're focused on, you know, getting these in the queue and projects underway, and then we'll have, you know, in a year or two's time, pretty significant progress towards that statewide infrastructure. But I think that's it for me. I apologize if I went long.
Great. Thanks, Matt. That was a great overview. And congratulations on round 3 opening. It's exciting. All right. Last but not least, I'll hand it over to Robin from Hawaii.
Hi, everybody. Robin Shishido with the Hawaii Department of Transportation. I'm just going to close my video just to help with any connectivity. So I'll go ahead today and talk about our NEVI plan and our implementation. But before I do that, you know, I'll talk about our overall fleet conversion, because this tied into the contract that we ended up using for our NEVI program. So Hawaii has really aggressive laws to be net zero by 2045, and in June 2021, there's a law signed that required us to convert our fleet from ICE to clean energy. You know, for us at DOT, we started converting our fleet early, and you know, our first thing was to look at was our light duty fleet. We had nearly a little over 300 vehicles, light duty fleet, and it was an aging fleet, and maintenance cost was you know, getting really high over the last 5 years, and you know, going forward, it was going to be a lot of money. But in order to convert this fleet, you know, it was also going to cost us a lot of money to provide capital upfront. There's just some pictures of, you know, the kind of vehicles that we were still using in our maintenance. I mean, I think this truck was probably over 25 years old. So when we first did our electric vehicle conversion, you know, we bought 4 vehicles with chargers, and it costed us about like almost $60,000 per vehicle. And, you know, converting 200 vehicles in that way, it would be a lot of capital upfront. You know, we also tried to lease vehicles, but even that was costly. And so we ended up putting out a RFP, and it was for electric vehicles and charging infrastructure as a service. And it was a statement of objectives and very broad, just basically saying we want electric vehicles and we want charging infrastructure, and, you know, to evolve and incorporate any new technology that you know, develops. We made an award in February of 2020 to Sustainability Partners. Sustainability Partners is a capital investment company, and you know, this was during COVID, so a lot of the negotiations of the contract and working out terms took a little while, and we ended up issuing a notice to proceed in December of 2020. And we also opened up this contract to all state agencies and counties for everybody to use.
Robin, are you supposed to have slides right now?
Oh, sorry, is it not sharing? I
No.
apologize. Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Oh, let me just back up real quick. I hit share, didn't quite hit share. Can you see him now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Sorry, this was the law that I mentioned, just gave us different time frames we had to convert our fleets to. Again, just showing the different fleet that we had throughout our districts. And this was just the vehicles that we had in our fleet. You can see this truck is probably 20, 30 years old, but we just having to maintain and utilize. This kind of brief of the contract that I was just talking about, kind of timeline on when we issued it, what was the purpose of the contract. And this was the first vehicles we got with our contract. After we issued the notice to proceed, within 4 months we were able to get vehicles and chargers. And for our first order, we did 43 vehicles and 43 level 2 chargers. And one thing about the contract, it had a lot of flexibility. They're a capital investment company. They had a fleet provider, and it wasn't tied to any one manufacturer for vehicles and or EVSE. And so, Teslas ended up being the best value for us, and we got 42 Teslas, replaced the sedans and light duty vehicles. Teslas, of course, people think they're luxury vehicles, but we, use them for our work as well. This is a pavement smoothness machine that, was able to hook up to a Tesla and able to perform data collection for us. Like I mentioned, the contract is real flexible, so we've been using it for airports, the ramp, runway police. We have an autonomous shuttle that goes between our terminals, and with the Ford Lightnings, we've been getting trucks coming in to replace that fleet. So now tying into the NEVI program, our Hawaii State Energy Office, they put in the NEVI or the AFCs back in round 1 and 2, and then round 5. And, at the time when they put in the AFCs, didn't quite know what the program was going to be, NEVI came out after. So on each of the islands, corridors were submitted, and mention about, presented some challenges for us. As far as our NEVI funding for Hawaii, overall the 5 years we'll get, 17.68 million, and that does not include the local match which HDOT is providing. So as far as the NEVI sites in general, so on Oahu with the 50-mile requirement between chargers and 25 miles from the end of a route. On a Hawaii Island, we require 2 sites. On Maui, we require actually 3 sites, but this one here on the kind of right side of the island, it's in a real rural area, way out where the grid requirements or grid capacity is very limited. This is part of the challenges I mentioned, that when the AFCs are first submitted and, now knowing what the program requires. Here on Molokai, it would require 1 site. Molokai has 7,000 residents and 52 miles of state roadway, and, grid challenges, capacity as well. On Lanai Island, it has 3,000 people, and we have 13 miles of state highway on that island. So another area where grid capacity is an issue. On the Big Island, Hawaii Island, we need 5 sites that we've identified. We do need a 4th one here in this red, but again, it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, and power capacity or grid capacity is also an issue. And because of the 50-mile requirement, that we've asked for exceptions. On Kauai Island, 2 sites are needed, and actually this one here shown in Kalahea, we have to update. We ended up pushing it a little further west as we were diving more into our site locations. As far as our NEVI plan, our goal or vision was to provide fast chargers in as fast as possible and make it the most affordable and convenient for the residents of Hawaii. As I mentioned, we have our aggressive goals, and we want to make sure we can meet that. Other goals we had was to have 8 stations by the end of 2024. And goals 2 and 3 was more with the CFI, the charging grants, working with private entities and just get more chargers installed, fast chargers. As far as public engagement, HECO or Hawaii Electric Company, they're the major provider on all of the islands except for Kauai, and they also have a electrification of transportation plan. So they had done a lot of survey work even before the NEVI program came out. We also put out some surveys, just gauging what people are looking for, what they may want. We're involved in a lot of working groups, including the AASHTO EV working group, Drive Electric Hawaii, and we do a lot of presentations. Everybody's wants to know about what's happening, and of course, everybody wants fast chargers. And even most recently, did a live or a recorded show, but here shown in Hawaii. As far as contracting goes, so when the NEVI program guidance came out, it had that provision where you can use a third party, and as long as you submit the CFR Part 200, you could use that contract. And so that contract I mentioned earlier to do our fleet conversion, it fit all the requirements. So we were able to utilize a contract that already existed. So as far as the site selection, the maps I showed earlier is kind of a general area where we would have our NEVI sites. But as we move forward, the HDOT team will go ahead and look at sites, and we wanted to first put on property owned by DOT, and that way right away was easy to do. But in general, we want to look at, if it's not DOT, other state agencies or even county agencies, and that way just the agreements and you right away can get done quicker. We also engaged early with the two power companies, like I mentioned, and just doing evaluation of grid capacity, making sure something that we're choosing doesn't require major upgrades. And once all that's set, then we turn it over to our contractor, Sustainability Partners, and they go ahead and have the electrician and have their team go out and further do assessments and do a draft layout that can get approved by everybody. And once that preliminary layout is confirmed, then we go ahead and issue them notice to proceed, and they can further finalize that site. So on Maui, the two sites specifically, we have our Kahului Park and Ride, which is owned by the DOT, and we opened that one on February 28th of this year. Next site on Maui is our Kapalua Airport. So it's owned by our airport division within the DOT. So again, it's a state-owned property. And on Oahu, at the Aloha Tower, it is property owned by our Harbors division, and we're anticipated to break ground here in the next 2 weeks. This Mililani Park and Ride is a site owned by the city and county of Honolulu. On Kauai, Prince-O Library, again, a state-owned property, and the Port Allen owned by our Harbors. On our Hawaii Island, the Hilo Civic Center, West Hawaii Civic Center, Waimea Civic Center, and the Volcano City Cooper Center, they're all owned by the county of Hawaii. And this last one, Ocean View, there's a park and ride lot. I initially thought it was owned by the county, but then we just figured out it was actually leased and it's a privately owned lot. So that might be the only site that it's not owned by a county or state agency. As we went through our sites with the, we want to try and get through the NEPA environmental compliance, as quickly as possible. So with our contract, it's real flexible. We work with the contractor hand in hand, and we said we would do the environmental clearance. All of our sites, will be categorical exclusions. Although we have delegation for the CADEC List C for federal highways, we haven't modified it to adopt the Department of Energy CADEC List C. So right now it's still a CADEC List D. Not too much for the requirements, and it's still pretty fast to process. As far as Section 106, we looking at properties or areas that was previously disturbed, so no historic properties affected determination. As far as Section 7, we have a programmatic agreement, and that meets the requirements for the NEVI sites. And now we also have to go to our state environmental compliance, but we have exemptions that we can utilize for the NEVI. So the environmental has been hasn't been a restriction for us, at least. It's been pretty smooth. So again, our contract with the Sustainability Partners, we have a master agreement that has a lot of general terms and conditions. And for each one of these sites, we issue a separate service addendum. And within that service addendum, we add in the additional requirements that are required under Titles 23 CFR and the 680 specifically for the minimum requirements for NEVI. So the first service addenda we issued, and this was last year, was to go ahead and acquire 32 chargers for at least 8 of our sites. And, we knew everybody was going to be coming out, and we wanted to ensure, getting the chargers was not going to be a holdup for us. So we have the 32 chargers. They're on island. As I mentioned, 4 have been installed already at our first site. And each one is just at district base yards and ready to go. The next service addendum was for that Kahului Park and Ride. And with this service contract that we have, we don't pay anything until the infrastructure is ready for use. So throughout that whole development part, we didn't put out a single dollar. And once it got put in place, then now we're paying monthly, and it's for 60 months. And that's because the NEVI program is, for 5 years after implementation. And so our next site, Aloha Tower, that one I mentioned is going to break ground here in the next 2 weeks. We use our service addendum. And, as you can see, what this helps us with is that, just paying these monthlies on all of them and the amount of money we got each year. So it's allowed us to do a lot of these sites all at once with the NEVI funding that we have. So I mentioned Kahului Park and Ride. We opened it in February of 28th. We started construction February 1st. So in about 4 weeks, we got it from start to finish. And it was very rushed. And I'll talk a little about lessons learned on that. As I mentioned, we wanted to provide affordable charging for the public. And so for our chargers, we're just passing on the electricity costs and the transaction fees and the tax. So the rates that we have here, at least for Hawaii, is real comparable to almost what your home rate might be, and other fast chargers that are actually only 50 kW. So only about 1/3 of the power the power output of ours. Just to show, so this is the dashboard that was set up that we're going to be utilizing for our chargers. This is for the first Kahului Park and Ride. It's showing 4 available. And at our chargers, at each charging station, there's 2 ports. And we did that so we can have a redundancy in case one port gets damaged, the connector gets damaged, you have another one to use. And also out of the 4 of the chargers at each site, 2 of them, one port is a CHAdeMO connector and one is a regular CCS. And once the NACS or the J3400 becomes available, then we're going to swap out connectors and also have that available. So Tesla users, and as people convert, they don't have to get an adapter. So it's just a dashboard showing of, chargers usage. Here it shows, what the daily, and this is just 7 days. Last 7 days, I can go up to 30, or even I think from the beginning when we first opened it. Kind of shows, how many charging sessions we've been getting. I think it averages about 25 to 30 a day. Shows the power output that's been put out for the day. Here, guys, kind of shows, generally when people are charging. In our electric rate, the Hawaiian Electric Company did have a EV rate plan. And between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., where a lot of the power is generated by solar, it was cheaper, about 13 cents cheaper per kilowatt hour. Here are just some metrics that the dashboard sets up, how many greenhouse gases you're preventing, e-miles, potential trees you're saving, carbon offsets. And, here it just shows how much revenue is generated. As I mentioned, we're just passing on electricity costs, taxes, and transaction fees. And so far it's been coming pretty good. I think in the last 2 months, each month has been about 10 to 12,000 in electricity bills, and we've collected just about that much revenue. I think it's maybe only been like 200 or 300 over, so it's been working out pretty good. Something. Shucks. Well, so I can't get to it. It screams in the way. Shoot, so I wanted to show. We also set up cameras at our site, and so we're going to be repaving this park and ride lot here in the next I think by the end of the month. But here's just a camera, so you can see this one stall is where our handicap stall is. This is all the equipment, and then chargers here. You can see there's people charging right now. We just submitted our second EV chart reporting, and in the first month of the first quarter and the last 3 months of the second, or the 3 months of the second quarter, Our uptime has been about 92.4%, so it's been pretty good, no issues there. I didn't put together a lessons learned slide, but a couple of things I'll mention is that, with our first park and ride lot, we, like I said, within 4 weeks, we went from breaking ground to have it operational. We did for the first 10 days offer free charging to the public, and that was to work out any bugs. And within that first days, I think there was a modem that needed to be reset. So communication went down for a couple hours, but was easily able to fix that. And it hasn't happened since. But one thing, once we started charging the users for it, then we had an issue with the credit card payment system. And for our chargers, it's made by Tritium. The software management is EV Connect, and the credit card payment system was Payter. And this was the first time all three had been put on a charger. And once we flipped that switch to start charging people, there was a communication issue. And you could still use the charger and pay through the app, but you couldn't use the card reader on the charger itself. And it took probably about 2 weeks to figure out who was the issue. And I think it ended up being the Payter system, the credit card reader system. So it took about 2 weeks. They found a workaround, and took about another week to get it resolved. So at least going forward with other stations, they know or they have the software issue fixed, so they can go ahead and that'll be a smooth sailing going forward. Something else maybe to think about, in the EV chart reporting, although Tritium and EV Connect were part of the pilot or development of EV chart, even when we had our first submission, there were just some minor errors on the, I think the column headings and just the naming conventions. And one thing also we did have trouble with, as I mentioned, each of our chargers has 2 ports. And so just, when you do the EV chart reporting, just make sure you know what a site ID is and a port ID, and when you do the reporting. And, another lesson learned, or what I've heard from some other states, is that, when they're putting out contracts, and like I think Alaska showed, you have multiple vendors. And so, EV chart reporting, because we have our contractor sustainability partners, they are submitting all the reports, and it's only one person or one entity I got to go in and review. And also, like with our dashboard that we have, we're just going to have one EV Connect dashboard that's going to have all of our chargers. So that's all I had, and I guess turn it back over to Delaney. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Robin. I liked that dashboard and the camera view. That is cool to see. All right, looks like we have a few questions here. Beth has a question for Robin. If these are leases, what happens at the end of the 5 years?
So the chargers themselves, actually, that one the DOT will own. And after the 5 years, when the NEVI runs out, the NEVI funding will have permanently paid for the construction and installation. And so after that 5 years, then it would be more operation and maintenance. So, assuming there's going to be additional federal funding, or maybe other federal programs, I think like carbon reduction, or even I think regular SDGB funding can be used for that. Or if not, we'll use our own state funding to continue paying for the maintenance operation. And maybe at that time, we might increase the rates also to go ahead and pay for that.
And a similar question about your Hawaii DOT's maintenance plan, given challenges with Tritium. Do you have guaranteed parts in supply if Tritium goes under?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as we installed our Tritium chargers, they came out with news that they're going bankrupt, and I think they have a buyer. So, I mean, as soon as that happened, we contacted them, and they assured us, business as usual. Their team is there still for support. They're still manufacturing, making parts, and yes, so sustainability partners, it is their requirement for maintenance. As part of our service addendum with them, if they don't meet that uptime, then we don't pay them, and so it'd be a percentage reduction. So yes, they are, getting parts and storing them here on the island, because, as you know, it takes a long time to get.
Great. All right. Another question for Hawaii. You're popular. Was it always the plan to install cameras? What's the total cost? Does it help diminish any vandalism issues? That would be my question. If you have like a microphone, you can yell at someone if they're vandalizing it. But yeah, have you seen any benefit by having the camera dashboard?
Yeah, so the cameras, I mean, that was part of our security plan. Cameras were the initial one, like that parking ride lot on Maui, before having the chargers there, you would see some homeless or houseless encampments show up. People would park their vehicles there and, become abandoned. But since we put in these tritium chargers and at night it lights up, we've seen that activity kind of diminish. And part of the camera system, it does record some activity. And so if there was vandalism, we would be able to see it. So far, we haven't seen anything, and we actually didn't put up signs yet to tell people that there is surveillance cameras yet, so we have to do that here when we do the parking repaving. And I can't remember the cost. I'd have to go look at it to see what it is per month, but I know we have a monthly fee on that that's included in that. I think what I mentioned, 20,000 per month we're paying.
Great. All right, we have a few minutes left. I will pose this question to all panelists. I'll have Josie and Matt go first to give Robin a break. But wondering if there's anything that you all noticed from applicants, maybe something that was challenging or maybe ambiguous in applications in which you then changed application requirements. Maybe you changed language to make it stronger, added additional requirements based on how this first round went.
I don't think so. We didn't really receive any requests for clarification as it related to the RFA. Although we did make one change just in that we did extend the initial application period to allow for applicants more time to engage with the utilities. Because the utilities weren't able to respond to the timeline of the RFA once the site had been established and communication had been made with the actual owners of the property. So we did end up extending the RFA deadline for a couple of weeks just to allow for people to have more meaningful engagement with the utilities. But that was really the only thing for us.
Makes sense. Yeah, we've heard that from a few other states as well with that utility timeline. Matt.
Yeah, one of the updates we made was kind of regarding application sharing and kind of publication of it. We got lots of requests for the applications, where I don't know, too many to count, basically. And so we, added acknowledgements and certifications that, hey, there's no confidential business information in here. That's something we've had for a long time is, we are not requesting confidential business information because we don't think it's pertinent to, an effective award decision. But then, if that's included, that's of course problematic if it's publicly shared. And so, we added additional certifications like, do you really certify that there's no public information? Or, CBI, we had some folks include like some PII, some personally identifying information that from our perspective was sensitive and shouldn't be, broadcast, of course. So we added certifications like no PII either. And then, a final certification saying like, I acknowledge this will be posted publicly to our website, just as a way to hopefully mitigate the number of information requests that we get. And that has provided a pretty significant benefit from round 1 to round 2. People can just go to the website, it's all there, so it's kind of that open book, and that's something we'll continue, 100% for our next couple of rounds.
Great.
Yeah, for us at HDOT, I mean, like I mentioned, we utilize an existing contract, but the contractor, at least from the first round, it's up to them on what subcontractors they want to use for certain things. I think they're switching out one of the subcontractors, and like I mentioned, for us with them, it's the uptime, so it's up to them to make sure they have that team that's going to deliver. And also, as I mentioned, we don't pay any invoice until the chargers are up and ready to go. So it's really on them to make sure they, try to get everything expedited and done quickly.
Great. Well, it looks like we're about at time. So I want to thank all of our panelists and attendees for attending today's discussion. This is being recorded, so I will send it out once that is uploaded to our YouTube channel. And then providing I get everyone all the state's permissions to share the slides, I can send those out as well. But yeah, thank you all again, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.